There he is. Hello.
There it is. There it is.
Doing, buddy?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm great, man. Great. Thanks for taking the time to be on my podcast.
Indeed. Oh, yes, no problem.
Oh, yeah.
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. No, you're good, man. It's been a weird week. We had a tornado out here in St. Louis, so it's been like just a cluster of all kinds of stuff going on. But man, I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, I love your shirt.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there was this website that made a bunch. Like, it's weird. There'll be like two different horror movie shirt websites where one will make one and then they'll like make their different version of it. So I kind of like this one a little bit better. I'm a huge fan of the Grindhouse, double feature thing. So yeah,
I actually have two posters in my living room
that's
from Grindhouse. Yeah,
that's cool. So did you see it in theaters when it came out?
I did not.
Yeah, I saw it opening night or opening day, I should say, because we were like, hey, let's be the first ones to see it right at like 10:30 in the morning. And it was the double feature time, like where it was like, because after a while, they're like, no, we'll just separate it and get more money. One will go, so we're like, hey, let's watch it as a double feature with all the trailers in between. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
Great,
it was
great.
fantastic. Okay, so you got a new album coming out in July. Do you have any gigs or anything you want to promote, or you just got the new album coming?
We have the new well, we have two albums coming.
Oh, cool.
We also have the re-release of Wisdom on vinyl.
Yes.
And then we also have a single for the new album that's coming out.
That's awesome.
And then we have a show also.
Oh,
So
which show is it?
it's I don't know how to pronounce it properly. It's Mechanismus
Mechanismus? Okay, yeah.
or Mechanismus. I've heard people say it that way too. So I don't know. I have to ask when I go up there, like I'm gonna poll people. How do you say it? So
When is it and where is it going to be at?
that is May 30th
Okay.
at Crocodile in
Rock.
Seattle.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. Okay, let's get started. Do you want to go into a little bit about the new album coming out, like kind of what inspired, kind of what was the, kind of going in at it? Was it different from the previous album and all this other stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So the new album that we have coming out is called More of Less. And yeah, I mean, basically, it's just more of less. No. Um, we initially like I didn't really have any time frame in mind. So really it's kind of been like 3 or 4 years worth of work on
Yeah.
this one. Um, and not concurrently. Like work on it a little bit here, a month later work on it some more.
Yeah.
And so it was really just like take our time, make sure we're like inspired when we're working on it, and just don't rush it this time. And I think the proof is in the pudding, I think. I'm very excited about the record coming out, and I really hope it resonates with people. It's definitely one of my favorites that 16 Volt has done, so
Awesome, man. I'm
I'm
excited
really
to hear it.
excited about
Yeah,
it.
it seems like it's generating a bit of a buzz. Everyone's really excited to hear about it. So I'm
Seems to
pumped.
be, yeah. We're getting some good support from the label too, which is, awesome, and great feedback from them. And yeah, it's just, I mean, so far everybody who's heard it is like, wow, that's great, man. This is a good one.
Cool. And you are still going through Metropolis?
Yeah, yep.
Awesome. How are they? I mean, man, you've been with them for a while. Tell me about kind of how that started. Like, I'm a huge, like, Metropolis was one of my stepping stones. I've talked about this in the past, so I'm not going to dig too deep into it, but kind of how did that come about and, your sort of relationship with Metropolis and why it's kind of lasted so long?
Yeah, I mean, that was, it's a long, long
Mm.
haul.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
long story. Yeah.
After after our third record,
Mhm.
in like 96,
Yep.
we kind of felt like, after all the touring we did and we really saw like growth on the band and stuff, like it was time for us. And we had a lot of interest from people. So it wasn't like we're like, hey, let's do this. I mean,
Of
we
course.
had, a decent manager at that point and lots of label interest to like step up into like a bigger kind of thing. And so, that we kind of went for that. Took quite a while. We got kind of impatient. We ended up signing with Slip Disc Mercury Polygram.
Yep.
And really for us, that was like, getting the major label distribution. And our manager was like more focused towards Mercury and was like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Slip great. I'm going to go to New York and meet with Mercury, and that's what he did. And so we had a lot of people at Mercury that were really into it and wanted to like work it and stuff. And then we started doing shows, and then like warm up shows for like whatever was to come. Did the record, obviously, Super Cool Nothing, with Bill Kennedy. We thought we had like a great record. And then Seagrams came in and bought Polygram, and it just kind of wiped the whole thing out, sideswiped us. And the record came out with like no promotion. It got moved over to Island as a catalog item.
Yep.
Um, and we were just kind of like, super defeated. And it was a really tough time for the band. And I just got like I was really after we spent like a year trying to get the record back and doing like legal stuff, and I just got like pretty much in the mode of like I'm not trying to do this anymore. And you know that was kind of where we were at that point. And then so I kind of quit. Then we had the stuff with Sony happen, with Primal, the video game Primal, and that kind of gave us an uptick. And that was really great. And then right after that, we went on tour with KMFDM. And then while we were on tour, we got like a deal memo from Capitol Records. And so we signed with Capitol, and came back home. And that was kind of a nightmare. They wanted me to like fire everyone in the band, and like,
Oh,
um, you know,
yeah.
it just was not a great experience overall. And
Right.
I just don't think it was a great fit for us either. And so I ended up at that point, I was like, I quit. I'm going home. Like I've tried this so many times. Like, and I moved up to Portland at that time. This was about 2006,
Huh.
and was actually having another kid, my daughter. So moved up to Portland, where my ex-wife is from, and
Mhm.
just kind of went up there for family and stuff like that. And I just started messing around after a couple of years of like not doing it, and working on songs. I just couldn't stop.
Of course, no, it's an artistic way. Absolutely.
Yeah, And then out of the blue, I got this call from Dave Heckman, who I'd known for quite a while, of course. And he's like, "What are you up to these days?" And like, seems like you kind of fell off. And I was like, "I kind of did." And
Mhm.
I was told him I was like working on some stuff, and he's like, "Well, when you get finished, send it to me. I want to check it out." And so I did. And then we signed with Metropolis.
Cool. Yeah.
And then part of that was like with my OCD, I'm
Hmm.
like, I don't want stuff all over the place. So I like brought my whole catalog to Metropolis, kind of consolidate everything. And so now, Metropolis has everything,
Yeah.
which is great. It's in one place. I get one check. I don't have to worry about like chasing it down and stuff like that. So makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, that was a weird time. I don't know if, I mean, I could be out of my element talking like this, but around the 90s, it seemed like a lot of these major labels were trying to scoop up industrial groups and industrial metal just because of Manson, Nine Inch Nails, Ministry. And they were kind of trying to scoop them and go, okay, what can I do with this?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's spot
Like, how
on.
can I market this? And then if it didn't go their way, they were going, well, let's just start plucking things off and see what we can. Am I out of my element saying that?
Absolutely not. No, you nailed it. I mean, at least that's what our experience was, right? Like, I mean, I've literally had like major label like marketing people say like, so can you try and write stuff that's more similar? Um, because we're not really sure like what to do with 16 volt, like who do we market to? Like, is it like it's too metal for like the electronic kids, too electronic for the metal kids, like and that I mean, probably still to this day, I don't know, but major labels don't look too fondly on the industrial thing because it's just to them it's played out. There's really no, chance of like making a bunch of money there and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of a small niche-based genre. So they tried, yeah, you're absolutely right. They went and they thought maybe like, well, maybe these guys we can push them towards like the corn audience or stuff like that. And so they try to do that, and then, you know, like you said, they'd start picking stuff apart and like this song doesn't really fit, it's too electronic, and we'd be like, well, hold on a minute. Like, what about our fan base? What about those? And
Yeah.
they're like, fan base? I mean, what we're trying to do here is like your fan base is like, the back row two seats of what we're trying to do, and it's like, oh, thanks. So I mean, for me, I just as great as it sounded to like have that be in that world of like the major label thing. And um I just didn't, it just wasn't me. It didn't work for me. I didn't fit into it. And you
Yeah.
know,
Everybody kind of fell into that moment. Even Skinny Puppy, when they were signed for is it American Records or America Records? And they're
yes.
like, you sound more like Nine Inch
Yeah.
Nails. And they're going, are you insane? Like we generated all this, this fan base and this momentum, and now you want us to sound like something else. No, no way in hell are we gonna switch our sound up. Like it was almost a slap in the face because I'm not trying to steer away from you at all, but it was like Nine Inch Nails was taken from Skinny Puppy. It was just like, how can you try and turn the tables on this kind of thing? Like, it was just a weird time, and
Yeah.
it was sloppy.
I think with Ministry too,
Yeah,
I mean, you kind of take the top bands from from the genre. I
yeah,
mean, Nails to me was always like when I first heard Nails, I was like, what is this? It was very poppy.
yeah. Very
Uh,
poppy. Yeah, of
and I mean, I'm a fan of pop structure and stuff like
course.
that, but I mean, it was pop, to me. And we like my like little crew of friends when we first heard it, we were just like, this is lame, but it grew on you,
Yeah, it
it grew
does.
on you. And then you kind of got past that and you realize like the genius of it and like how great it actually is, you know. But they really escaped, clearly,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Um, and I think in a lot of ways too, sort of like left and let the door close behind them rather than like pull people through with them. I mean, there was a few, of course, of bands that they tried to kind of like bring up with them a bit, but
Of course, absolutely, absolutely.
and like Ministry. Um, I mean, Ministry with Sire and all that. You know what I mean? It just didn't
That
quite,
whole thing. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know. I think we just, the genre that we're in, I guess, just it's not very, widely enjoyed. I don't know why I like it, but
I mean, it's a weird time right now because I'm starting with a lot of artists that I'm talking to, dark wave and goth, and the sort of another wave of post punk and stuff. Like there's this kind of scooping up where there's like a goth scene that's kind of being embraced online. Like the internet has kind of brought more people together, and
yeah,
everybody that I'm talking to now, especially underground or people who've been in the business in a long time, it there's another gathering happening. So I think, the more we keep kind of pushing into connecting with other underground artists and independents, you're going to start generating another fan base. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not giving up. You're not going, well, this isn't going, blah blah blah. Like I think you're at a point now where there's going to be another wave coming.
maybe.
From what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
I've learned not to count on anything
Of
in
course,
that way. But yeah, no, I mean, optimistically,
of course.
it sounds great. And of course, there's younger generation now, right? And like,
Mhm.
I think when you get exposed to any of the bands from this genre, if you like it, I mean, there's just a whole world to dive into there on so many levels and so many little like subgenres within like industrial.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Um, There's, obviously like the more EBM kind of stuff, the more like cold wave guitar based stuff.
Yep.
It's just a lot to listen to there.
It's great. I think it's a great time. Let's go back. Let's kind of Tarantino back to the beginning for you. I hope I'm not like just repeating a bunch of questions that you're used to hearing, but let's kind of get into the history. You grew up in Portland, Oregon, right?
I did not.
Okay, where'd you grow up at?
Well, I was born in Miami,
Okay,
and left there when I was 3 with my, obviously with my parents.
right. Yeah.
Moved to Southern California. So really, I grew up in Southern California.
Oh, cool.
Um, was getting into a lot of trouble, in my teens. And so my mom thought it would be a good idea to like move us to more of a smaller area and just get out of LA and stuff. So we moved to Tahoe,
Mhm.
which is a very small area. Um, and really the only, sort of connection to any kind of interesting things going on was Reno, for music. A lot
Mhm.
of punk stuff going on there. Um, and then I moved to Portland. Well, from Tahoe, I moved back to Florida. I went to engineering school. I left high school early when I was like
Which
17.
school did you go to?
I went to Full Sail.
Oh, we went to Full Sail. Oh, that's my
Yeah.
school. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
But before it was what it is now. It was like, tiny. It was like two studio rooms, like,
Oh,
it
jealous.
wasn't like, it was pre the new campus and all that stuff. This was in like 89. So
Yeah,
I mean, this is a long.
right at the beginning. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So kind of learned some of that stuff and then moved to LA and started doing internships. And then just I got an offer to come up to Portland and work in a studio up here as a second engineer. So that was kind of the plan. It just so happened that my mom and my brother were moving up here to Portland too. So we just kind of everybody went here, and then yeah, I ended up being here for like a year and a half, and then went back to LA.
Mhm.
I mean, just kind of stayed in LA until 19 years ago. I moved back to Portland again. So kind of back and forth between LA and Portland for quite a while. But
What artist that popped your cherry? Was it the punk music? Was it electronic? And then did you kind of start on one genre and kind of find your path into that kind of thing?
yeah, I mean, mostly like passively, I guess. More metal stuff.
Okay.
I was really into like, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, early Metallica,
Yeah.
um, AC/DC. And then I kind of learned about punk, so I was really into punk rock.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I was in Tahoe that I met a guy who had a music store in Reno who started giving me some like Wax Tracks promo stuff. 'Cause he wasn't really sure about it or whatever. And he's like, you might like this, you like the punk rock stuff.
Right.
And that was really for me like what solidified like what I wanted to do in life and kind of inspired me. It was a Revolting Cocks, You Goddamn Son of a Bitch video that he gave me that
Yeah.
I popped that in my
Beautiful.
VCR
Yes.
and when I saw that I was just like that's what I want to do. That's
Was
the
there ever a surreal moment where the artist that you grew up listening to is a now a band, artist that you've worked together or collaborated with?
there's been many moments. I think the one that was, for me that was full circle though was when I played with Revolting Cocks for like two years at Cold Waves,
Yeah.
at Metro Chicago, which is where that You Goddamn Son of a Bitch is recorded at, right? So I was like, this is unreal. I'm up here, what was it, like 25, 30 years later. But, here I am, like on stage with, minus Al. He
Right.
wasn't around for these shows, but, um, you know, that was full circle. But yeah, I mean, I've been, I've met most of my heroes, like it's kind of unreal, uh,
Amazing.
very humbling. And, there's that saying like never meet your heroes. I think that's true with a few people I've met, but for the most part, it's been, sort of like the admiration in both directions has been like really humbling and crazy, right? Like, meeting people and be like, oh yeah, I have a band called 16 Volt. They're like, oh dude, what's up? I love your stuff, you know,
Such a
so kind of
surreal.
crazy.
What was probably one artist that you toured with and everything that really stands out the most? Was it Revolting Cocks or is there another?
I mean, touring, we haven't really done any like huge tours. I mean, I think the closest thing would be KMFDM.
Okay. Yeah.
We've toured with them three times.
Yeah.
Once full North American tour, Canada and US, and then we also did another run with them that was like West Coast. And then I started another band several years ago that went defunct, but it was called Black December. We did a tour with them with that as well. So yeah, that was probably the biggest tour that we did with any of our like, heroes from back in the day.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, I mean, playing with a bunch of one-off shows. I mean, we've Limp Bizkit and Corn and like stuff like that. But
Little one-off shows and stuff.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, Thrill Kill, we did a tour with Thrill Kill Cult too, that was actually the first band I ever saw play live from this genre was Thrill Kill Cult. And yeah, so then to end up sharing a bus with them however many years later, that was also kind of mind blowing.
That's got to be some wild stories. That's great.
Yeah, so that was cool.
Yeah. What was your first instrument introduction?
Um, Guitar. I grew up in a house that had like a lot of musical instruments around. My dad was a songwriter, and my mom was a classically trained pianist. So we had a piano in the house, and guitars around and stuff. So I mean, they were more like I didn't view them as like instruments at that time. They were just like other toys, you know. So and I still kind of treat them that way, they're like different things to make sounds from. I'm not like a an instrumentalist,
Right. You're
so
like a classically trained instrumental. It's just like grab an instrument and just try and find a comfort level with it and then just kind of see what you can create with it kind of situation.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's more of a sound thing for me, like learn the sounds that they make and figure out how to use those to make a song.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what did you have any bands before 16 volt, or was 16 volt sort of your first introduction into like a music and getting like a project or a band going?
I mean, nothing super serious, like, in high school is like, let's have a band, punk
Of course.
band,
Yeah.
played like one show in somebody's, living room at a party or something, but nothing, 16 volt was sort of the first thing. And,
Mhm.
you know, I never really, I mean, I tried a couple of different things over my career, but like 16 volt has always been the
Of course.
main thing. And for some reason, I just keep doing it.
That's okay. No, was that like a at home kind of project, like a sort of bedroom studio project, or were you able to take that into like, borrowing full sale studio or anything like that? Was there ever a moment like that? Or was it
With
all
16
bedroom?
volt? No, I mean it's been all over the place.
Okay.
I mean, I actually, got my first deal with Cargo, Reconstruction Cargo,
Mhm.
when I was working as an intern in LA, and I was doing demos and stuff, and I was doing that in studios. So
Cool.
and then the first the first record we did at Chicago Tracks with Keith Fluffy Auerbach, and we ran out of time, so we came back to Portland, and I ended up getting Dave Ogilvy
Ooh,
um, to help finish up that record, Wisdom,
yep.
and which, by the way, we're really re-releasing on vinyl here in a couple months.
Tell me about that experience working with Dave.
It was cool, man. He's an interesting guy, super talented, um, very energetic. Just yeah, just like a super chill, like what you would kind of assume a Canadian guy would be like. We talked a lot about hockey and
Yeah, he loves hockey. Yeah.
yeah, he actually sent me a jersey from his team, which was really cool. I still have it, which was actually Cargo Records team, which was pretty funny. But he's a big Montreal fan. But yeah, he was just really cool to work with, very professional.
Yeah.
Um,
What year was that? Was that 93, you said?
that would have been 91, I think 91 or 92 in that
That was
area.
pre Nine Inch Nails, pre Marilyn Manson, that whole. Because I remember reading, Manson and Nine Inch Nails. There was like this whole dilemma when they were working on Antichrist and stuff. And I remember they were like bumping heads when it came to a lot of the production and mixing and stuff like that. So I didn't know if that was something you were in the middle of or if this was just before all that mess.
Well, I think Pretty Hate Machine had come out when we
Yeah,
were
91, yeah.
in that stuff. So yeah, I think it was around 90 92. Yeah,
Okay,
maybe some of it was finished in 93, but
cool.
yeah, and then the second one we ended up doing here in Portland just to kind
Cool.
of like save some money.
No,
And then the third one back to Chicago Tracks, and did it out there in Chicago at Al's studio. This gentleman named Reed Himes, and Al did it in their studio, and then the fourth one we did in LA, at like serious big studios.
yeah.
And then yeah, kind of came back home for a couple of them, and it's just been a mixture. I have a studio at my house now, so the new record was done at my house, which is awesome, to be able to just like not have a ticking clock, which also means, money going away.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
What album do you think was probably the most vulnerable time for you to make an album?
wow, that's a great question. I think there's two sides to it. Like, I would say the last two records that we did before this were pretty hard times for me. Um, I had lost my mom during that period. My mom was really sick in the first when we did the negative space. She was suffering from Lewy body dementia, and and basically really had like hallucinations really bad and like really scary shit. A lot of that record is about, being in that space of negativity of just like bad stuff. And so yeah, that was pretty hard. And then, my mom passed away during the second record. So that was a rough time too. But I think like on a more of a positive side, like this record to me is pretty was yeah, it's pretty vulnerable. Because I'm kind of trying some different stuff, but I'm also just like trying to get back to like why it was I wanted to do this in the first place and like not be inspired too much by other stuff that's around me.
Right.
Um, and really like I didn't really listen to much music at all
Yeah.
around making this stuff.
Yeah.
Not really influenced by anything. So,
Okay.
that can kind of make it a little bit like scary, I guess,
Understand that.
just putting yourself out there. I feel like I'm putting myself out there pretty heavy on this one.
That's good. That's
So,
amazing. And it
yeah.
just, I've always tried to kind of go in that route. It's so difficult because I'm such a musical sponge where I'll listen to a lot, especially when I'm trying to find inspiration or gather creativity. And then I eventually feel like I'm trying to filter that into my music going, well, now I'm starting to sound like this or I'm starting to sound like that. And I'm like, I got to stop doing that because it's like, you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
feel like it's like walking through a hall of mirrors and it's just become this sort of influence of an influence of an influence. It's just like, so I think that's amazing where you can just go, look, I'm devoiding myself of any music at this point and just going just a blank canvas and just whatever feels here is going
yeah,
there.
yep, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always times like you're saying, I kind of thought that was funny because I mean, there's times through, since I started doing this where it'd be like working on something and it's really like totally digging it and you'd be like, what is that? Like, it's reminding me of something, And
Yes.
I'll be like, oh, that's like the riff to like,
Yep.
some
Oh,
other song that someone else did or whatever. And then you have to like delete it and,
yep.
Um, so yeah. And then there's other times too where you're like, it sounds really similar and derivative or whatever. And people are like, no, no, it doesn't. Like, just go with it. So I don't know. It's a lot of, music's weird. It's weird, right? Like,
It's a weird, yeah.
all subjective and like, or sometimes subjective and, so
Did you was I'm trying to get come up with the name of it. Was it American Pornography?
American porn songs.
Yeah, was that politically driven or socially driven? Did it have a lot to do with the adult business itself? I was wondering about that.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with the adult business.
Okay. Okay, that's why I wanted to make sure because I've read a few flip-flops on it and I'm going, I need an answer to this. But yeah, go ahead.
I mean, we may have sarcastically answered that at one point
Okay,
to
gotcha.
someone, like, yeah, whole thing's about porn.
Oh,
No, it literally is porn and like the, sort of graphic nature of
okay,
things.
right.
And really, it's not political, it's more
Okay,
social. I
fair.
mostly stay away from politics myself, always have.
Okay,
It's more social stuff and more like personal or just like like human stuff,
of
human
course.
condition, and
Yeah,
it's like almost like the result of politics, not the politics themselves that we focus on.
of course. No, I believe that. Just like understand of like human nature, taking care of your fellow man or your fellow woman. It's just like there needs to be that sort of bond instead of just letting things divide us. If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Yep.
Absolutely. Um, So let's kind of go into like the nerdy gear side of everything. So when you first started out, what was your stepping stone on? Were you using everything analog or did you start with a DAW?
There was no DAW when I
Okay.
started.
Okay.
Um, the first stuff that I wrote I had Oberheim synth, Oberheim OB8, I think it was.
Okay.
I had a DMX drum machine, no sequencer at all,
Wow.
and a 4-track cassette
Okay.
recorder. And that's kind of where I started.
That's
And
awesome.
then once I went to school
Hmm.
uh, and learned how to, run a board, I tried to get where I could use boards and stuff, consoles. Um, and that's kind of where it went after that. And that was, all analog at that point. I did have, there was some. there was some stuff coming around at that point around sampling, but it wasn't accessible, to anybody without hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there was a system called Synclavier, that was kind of new. A lot of people are calling it digital tape.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, really made the switch to, Wisdom was all in Sonic. So it's in Sonic EPS and using the onboard sequencer. And I mean, like half of our studio time was like dumping, syncing up the EPS to like tape and like, dumping tracks because there was only like I had the little output expander, but it was like only 8 outputs, and you know, it's just gnarly. Like there's a MIDI to SMPTE converter that you had to use, and like it syncs up to the tape machine, and it was just
Oh, it's a
nightmare.
chaotic mess. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of how it was for a few years. And then, eventually was like, okay, there's stuff coming out now for a computer that you can like sync, use
Yeah.
sequencing for. And it started off mostly MIDI. There wasn't really any sampling.
Yep.
And then, plugins started to come around and started doing that and got off of the hardware samplers and, you know,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah. And, nowadays well, I mean, Pro Tools was kind of always the direction because that was sort of like the studio standard. So yeah, and I'm still on Pro Tools,
I'm
and
still using Pro Tools. That's your main.
that's my main instrument actually.
What about when it comes to stage? Is there any shift in, do you use, some backing tracks and what's your usual stage setup looking like?
Yeah, I mean, we've always used backing tracks in one form or another. There's just no way to pull off,
Of course. I'm not
so
just,
many sounds, and
mhm.
um, it's we don't get much scrutiny for that in
Of
this
course,
scene.
not in that genre. No, no way.
Yeah, a lot of it's funny to see people, like I have some friends that are in like bigger metal bands who are like, you guys run backtracks? It's like, dude, think about it. Like
You have,
we'd have to have like 50 keyboard players. Like,
of course, yeah.
but but yeah, I mean, back in the day, it was like kind of started off with running like DA88s were pretty big, ADAT.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh yeah.
we even did like CD. Mini disc is another format we used for a while.
Hmm.
Um, we used there was some stuff back then with like flash drives and things like that. Eventually, kind of got into like using DAT machines. Um, and for a long time, I mean, because there was nothing really multi-track, so you had all the stuff in mono, and then so the left side would be like the click track for the drummer, and the right side would be all the music and stuff. And um, that was kind of how that all went, and eventually made the switch to using a laptop with an audio interface. But I mean, that just like always gives me such massive anxiety.
Hmm.
Uh, Tried to figure out like the redundancy thing. That gets a little expensive though. You start talking about having to run two MacBooks and having like a Ducker unit in between it and stuff like that. But yeah, so last year, well, it wasn't last year, it's probably maybe like 6 months ago, we're going to start using a new thing. It's called a BB. I actually have it by me here, but it's made by a company. It's called a B Beat, B.BEAT,
Hmm.
and it's a little. They're smaller unit. They have two. They have like a rack mount unit. You can actually run two also, and it recognizes each unit. And if one crashes, the other one just takes over automatically. You don't even hear it. But yeah, we're just using the smaller unit. But it has like 6 outputs on it. It runs video. It runs MIDI. It runs. What else does it run? Uh, it has a built-in Wi-Fi, so you can run notes off it to like your phone.
Ooh.
You can like put your phone on it,
Yeah.
on wherever, and Wi-Fi to the unit, and it'll like you can use it as a teleprompter, or you can use it for like charting or like guitar notes or any of that kind of stuff. And um, yeah, it has a built-in little mixer for the drummer. So I mean, it's just like an amazing little unit. No need to have a laptop on stage. It has Ethernet, Wi-Fi. It's just like crazy little thing.
That is wild.
That's kind of what we're using now. And I mean, so far so good. It powers like everything on. We're not doing any of the MIDI stuff with it, but you can have it power your lights through MIDI if you want, or like program changes. But we're using it for mostly for like the video sync and being able to have multi-track output,
That's cool.
being able to run stuff in stereo. I have had to go back and like reprogram stuff and remake our backing tracks from way back.
Oh yeah. I can only
Like
imagine.
Motor Skill, I only had a mono live version of that, so I have no way to. So I actually had to go and like build a new one off of like the CD, like pull the CD in and like rebuild it, and stuff like that. So kind of crazy, but it's in stereo now, so that's great.
There you go. That's what I was going to ask. How was it? How the process of kind of taking all your old stuff and converting it over to digital? Would it become just a major pain in the ass to do?
Yeah, I mean, man, I mean, from those old songs, like, really the first three records,
The demos, yeah.
we got stuff, we knew that we were playing live, right? So, part of the studio process is like doing mixes, and then when you're done with the mixes and everything's good, then we go into like, okay, now we got to bump this for live. So it's, mute, 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 mono everything,
Oh,
make sure the levels are still kind of there, mute all the drums, bass, guitars, vocals, and then
right.
you do a dump of that, right? So we would dump it down to like a DAT tape in the studio, and that was that.
Chaotic. That's so cool. I like hearing all this sort of inner workings of how little bits work. I feel like I'm kind of the one where it's just like, I just give me all the geekery. I love it.
Yeah.
Were there any because I know you had your starter set up or anything. Did it change over time? Like, did you start gathering up new scents and
Oh yeah.
so is there ones that stand out the most for you and what's kind of stuck around the longest?
I mean, really for me, the Ensoniq stuff was like I had that stuff so mastered. I didn't even really have to. I mean, it was just like I was so fast on it, and just having the whole system like just like secondhand for me. And
Oh,
so they came out with the EPS 16, and they had the EPS 16 Plus, and so that was one that we used for a long time. I did eventually switch over to like a Kai, or like a Kai S2800 for quite a while. Emax was another one we had for a bit. Synth wise, I didn't really get like too deep into like the synth stuff, which was probably in retrospect really good because it's can be very expensive. And I really skipped the modular thing as well. Uh,
hmm
uh,
smart because the oh boy, is that
yeah,
it goes deep. And I've met some people where it's just like if they get one and then they're like, well, now I got to get this so I can connect it to, oh God, yeah.
yeah, there's no stopping you once you
That is
start,
yeah.
because you got to have a different thing to do this, and then you need another thing to do
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
you end up with like a small rack, and they're like, this is too limiting, and then you need,
Like a Lego set. You know what I mean? It's like you can't have this until you have this, and it just becomes this whole mishmash of just oh my, it's just expensive. It's why I look at that and I go, how much is that? Like it just
yeah.
boggles my mind, dude.
Yeah, if I was making $1 million a year off of 16 volt, I'm sure I would have a massive modular setup. But yeah, I mean, really for me, it's mostly been like everything centered around Pro Tools. And just lots of trying different plugins, and it's more plugin stuff these days, right? Like I have a
Oh yeah.
specific set of stuff I use, and for like I mean, you don't even really need a sampler anymore, It's like you can Pro Tools, you can just drag and drop a loop in it and it'll time it out. You can chop it in 2 seconds, and it's just the workflow is like just so much more um in line with doing like electronic music, So
Um, was there ever, when you did soundtrack work versus 16 volt, was there ever a difference or do those kind of go hand in hand?
there is a difference. I It's a different kind of vibe, right?
Yeah.
Like the music takes precedence over anything visual when I'm working on like music, uh, band music or whatever.
Yeah.
But like the stuff I've been in, except for Repo the Genetic Opera, I didn't really have. I wasn't like locked up to picture on that. I had like some inspiration videos that I was sent, but so that was kind of its own thing. But yeah, I mean the other stuff I've done for like soundtracks, for movie soundtracks, I've been locked to picture, and
Mhm.
try to like watch what's happening and try to like use the music to kind of support the story and the mood of how it's supposed to feel or whatever. So that's a bit different. Um, but yeah.
Did you take what you learned from soundtracking and everything like that? Did that kind of meld into the albums that followed? Did you feel like you took some and went, now I can kind of make it stand out a little bit more with 16 volt? Did you feel like you took some of those elements and was like, or do you feel like you kind of stuck with the same format?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the opposite
Okay.
way, you know. really just taking like 16 volt, but I mean, with the sort of like mindset of trying to like craft, and I hate that word craft, it's so pretentious, but
Okay.
craft sound around, like I said, the mood, like there's something, happening here. You're building tension. So you try to find sounds that sort of match that mood, but it's not really any different than, when I'm like writing stuff for 16 volt or whatever. So
You brought up Repo. Tell me about how they came and approached you about it, and kind of how was your involvement with all that?
so one of my good friends from LA, Joe Bishara, he's a very well-known composer nowadays.
Okay.
Um, he was just like working with a lot of different people down in LA at the time and people doing different things for that movie, like a lot of different guitar players were doing guitar stuff and, different bass players were doing bass stuff and just trying to get as many things as they could get to try to like build these cool songs. So yeah, I did programming and a tiny bit of guitar on stuff, but mostly just like sampling, programming, loops, and just basically had total freedom. Like here's the root of kind of what the song is, and some of them were like just acoustic or like a piano.
Yep.
And so just like piling, loops and samples and stuff on top of it to try to like give them as much as they could, you know, be inspired by or keep.
Of
Crush
course.
your fingers, keep.
Was it a surreal moment? Did you see it in theaters and go, "Oh, I hear my piece and this"?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I can pick out a lot of this, and it's funny, I still have the sessions.
Yeah.
Um, and there's some things where they didn't use anything that I did, and so there's some things I've pulled out of those and used for 16 volt. Like
Cool.
you're not going to use that, I will. But
Right.
yeah, it was interesting. I mean, when they were doing the tour with Repo, I got to go down and hang out with like Jaron Bausman and
Cool.
Joe and stuff like that. Terrence Zdunich, so that was really cool. And watched it. I wasn't part of the QA, but was there.
Of course. And
That
I
was
mean,
really cool.
it's crazy that it's become kind of these sort of underground, sort of rocky horror where people will do the whole song and dance and have props and stuff like that. Like it's become a kind of like a spawn off of like Rocky Horror Picture Show where I've had friends, they'll dress up, they'll go, they'll
Yeah.
kind of sing along and stuff. Like it's wild. It's become like its own thing now. And that's so cool that you were able to get involved in that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was very lucky to have Joe ask me to work on it and stuff, and
Cool.
Joe's thrown me a couple projects, which has been really cool. So
That's great. Tell me about, let's kind of go into like doing shows and stuff like that. So you're used to, having like these little tiny, garage bands and whatnot. Tell me about 16 volt and then going, all right, let's try and translate this to the stage process.
yeah, I mean, I think I was so young at the time, and so isolated. Didn't really know how to do it. Mostly just like you see videos, right? So try to emulate what you see. And we had all kinds of ideas like, oh, we need these lights and this and that, but really, is pretty naive and innocent, just kind of like just started doing it.
Right.
Um, the first show we ever played was in San Diego at what's the name of that festival? There was like a radio festival. I think it was in 93 or 92 that we
Wow.
played. And it was like I had to borrow a whole band. It was just me. I didn't have in the band in 16 volt at the time, right? So I borrowed a band from here in Portland,
Mm.
minus their singer, and the singer was actually dating my what would become my wife. When we did that, I after we did that, I kind of took her from him. I felt really bad. I'm like, I took the band and I took your
You took
girlfriend.
a woman.
Yeah. Well, we're divorced now, so
Yep.
that'll work out. But
Yep.
yeah, so that and just didn't really know. I mean, not even like like no image of, I've never been like a huge fan of like the image thing myself. So, um, with 16 volt, it's like I'd never really saw myself as like the singer.
Right.
Um, it just happened to be that there wasn't anybody really around when things were starting to go that it was be like I would do a lot of like scratch tracks and I had a buddy that lived in Tahoe who was like doing vocals
Mhm.
and it just it just became like by default, it's like, okay, I guess I'll do it, you know. I didn't have any sort of like theatrical desire or, plans. I mean, it just sort of evolved over time, you know. Um, and having other guys in the band, especially when I started touring with guys that have done a lot of tours, I mean, that's sort of just natural, right? Like they kind of bring that to the band anyway, so
Right.
can't help but learn off of them and stuff like that.
How did it kind of started out? Was it like, was there lights and then there was like was there like a video thing? And then kind of how did it evolve through time?
Yeah, no video really. When we first started, it was all like whatever the venue had for lighting.
Gotcha.
And it evolved. There's different times where on certain tours we started to do more of the lighting stuff, more like just supplemental stuff. Like we'd bring strobe lights, bring a fog machine. Then there was, kind of got more into like production on the stage, so like bringing trussing and banners and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to remember when it was, but I think it was like after Super Cool Nothing, we started to get more serious about like we want our show to look different than what a local crowd sees at that venue. They go to a show on a Friday night, like they use the house lights. We want it to not look like the house lights. We want it to be like something kind of special. So
Of course.
we got more into like bringing lighting, um, bringing some moving heads and video. As soon as we could do video, that was like a huge thing. Like I feel weird doing shows without synced video nowadays, like everything has to be sort of like synced up and like, so I
That's
mean, it's all budgetary and what you can afford to do for the show, right? Like if it's a one-off show and you're flying somewhere, there's not a whole lot you can do. Um, but if you're on more of a tour, then you can bring more stuff out. And so it just kind of like, you know, goes with the flow, I guess, on that.
did you ever have like a pre-show ritual or did you, how do you pump yourself up? Do you listen to anything? Do you just, kind of stay in your own zone? Like, do you have a
Mostly just like crippling stage fright. Is-
I
yeah.
get that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still have, I used to have like really bad anxiety attacks while I was on stage, actually. I don't think anybody noticed, but, I thought I was gonna like pass out and just, kind of had to learn how to deal with all that. But no really pre-show ritual. I mean, vocal warm-ups, is a big thing for a while. Once I realized how much easier it is to sing live when you warm your voice up, like that was a big thing. That's kind of part of my pre-show ritual. Just like usual stuff. I don't have any like, we don't like sacrifice a lamb or anything like that. It's just you know, just
Oh,
get ready for the show.
right.
Just get amped up. I mean, usually like if it's our show, we'll kind of clear everybody out.
Yeah. Can you see the cat? Yeah. I love when animals, I'll have podcasts where the animal will kind of
Right.
come around or they'll be like, oh, there's my cat or my dog or whatever. I always love those.
You're
Those are great.
you're not supposed to be up there. Get down. Get down.
What's your cat's name?
Smokey.
Oh, cool.
Oh, come on, get down there. Right. Um, but yes, yeah, rituals. No, I mean, we kind of clear everybody out and just kind of hang with each other.
Yeah.
Just try to like, reconnect really quick before we go on.
Yeah.
Kind of like do the like, let's do this, get
Oh.
pumped.
Did you have a favorite venue that you like to play at?
Um, I mean, Metro is my
Metro.
favorite, I think, overall. Irving Plaza in New York is also, I love playing there. Where else? I mean, there's been a few that have just been like incredible. There's a place, I forget the name of the place in San Diego or San Francisco.
Hmm.
Played with KMFDM. It's this beautiful venue.
Yeah.
Uh, because the Mayan in LA is also another like really beautiful venue.
Yeah.
And usually any House of Blues is like really, really nice. Top of the line sound and the green rooms are usually pretty nice.
I know it's nice when you
You
find
know,
a green room. If you get a green room where it's like a nice area and it's not just some weird backstage slab, it's like, oh, now I feel like a band. I feel like an artist. Like,
yeah, it does make you feel a little bit more like, okay, things are happening. This is good. I'm not worried about getting scabies from sitting on this couch.
right, exactly. Oh man. I know you're talking about anxiety. I was talking with Ian Ross from Fleshfield, and he's like, I would throw up before shows like so much.
Oh God.
I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I can only imagine because I still even just through like doing podcasts and stuff, I get like pre-podcast anxieties where I'm just like, okay, rev yourself up. Let's go. Like it's still even pre-show or pre any. It's just like you gotta get the momentum going or anything like that. It's
Yeah,
always, of
you have to kind of get in the mode for sure.
course
I
you
mean,
do.
I think the nervousness, what I tried, to turn that into like a positive,
Yeah.
it's like it brings your adrenaline out, which is,
Mm-hmm.
key. Um, I think especially if you're touring, it's just like every day grind, 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 and you're just exhausted. So that adrenaline that you get is like that fuels the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
I think it shows you care too.
I
Like if you're
think
not,
so. I think there's a level of like I'm concerned about my performance. I want to give everybody the best that I have.
yep,
Yep.
completely.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there a style or genre that you would like to dabble in that you haven't done yet?
Yeah, I mean, I really, really like sort of like ambient electronic. And I've started this new record actually was really it started off very, very electronic and there was like no guitars in anything.
Hmm?
And I kind of had to go back um and rework a lot of things to make it a little more like 16 volt-ish. But yeah, I mean I love electronic and I just don't it seems like every time I sort of start dabbling in it, it becomes this 16-volt song, you know. But at some point I would love to just do like some cool ambient like electronic stuff.
Anything that really like drew that inspiration? Any artists like Gene Michael Jr. or Brian Eno or anything that really was like, yes, this is it. I love this.
Yeah, nothing really too major like on that front. I mean, for me it's more like some of the like more mellow stuff from like Air or
Okay. Yep.
you know, who else off the top of my head? Um
Anything from like Warp Records or anything like that type of stuff.
Not really. I mean, and I'm not like super educated in it either.
That's
A lot of times I'll just be listening to like, like Apple Music streaming or whatever, like radio. Um, but yeah, I mean, I do have like a lot of like bands that I listen to that aren't in the industrial genre that are, kind of more pop electronic or, even just like artists.
that's
Um, so
awesome. What
not that.
non sorry, I was gonna say what non-music artists influence you, like authors, directors, painters, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, not too much. I mean, for me, like William Gibson, obviously, like Ray Kurzweil, like
Yeah.
just some of the conceptual stuff there. I mean, for me, movies have been like a huge influence on just like the dystopian aspect of things. So it's like name a director, name a movie. I
Yeah.
mean, pretty much just all that stuff, all the like sort of cyber sci-fi dystopia, um, highly inspirational.
Yep.
Um,
Do you have a
but
go-to? Do you have a go-to movie where you're like, this is my comfort movie?
I mean, I think one for me that like I've watched a bunch of times in the last like year, it seems like, is District 9 again. Like,
Yes.
just I don't know. I've seen that one a bunch lately for some reason. Um, I just love how it's just shot and like one of the things I think that's really interesting about it is it just seems so regular and like it is, the focus is on the story that doesn't really have anything to do with like the fact that they're aliens. It's more of like it's almost like a social commentary, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's just like these giant, alien ships in the sky is not really like the focus of it. So I think that's one thing that's so cool about it. But yeah, I mean any of that kind of stuff, like Running Man was a huge one for me too. Like, I sampled Running Man on Wisdom, and um it's hard not to look at like the cities right now and just kind of feel like we're at the beginning of all that.
Yeah.
I go through like downtown Portland occasionally, and it's just like,
Oof.
the skyscrapers are empty, and people have flocked out, and so it's like, what's going to happen down here? The roads are going to crap, and I could just imagine that we're not too far off potentially, right?
Yeah. Well, if nothing changes, this might be our future. It's one of those things where you go, or you sit and you watch and you go, that's fascinating, but then it starts to progress and you're going, oh, maybe that's not okay that we want this. Like,
Right. Well, I mean, with like AI and things being more automated and delivered, um, it's just, yeah, I can see where, Amazon is just that's where you get your stuff.
yeah,
No other stores. It's just Amazon. And the drone brings it to you and drops it off, you
scary,
know.
crazy. What's your thought process on AI music as a whole? Do you feel like it's scary? Do you think it's a war? Let's fight this war against the robots kind of situation? What's your thought on that sort of AI music?
I'm not a, I mean, it sounds hypocritical and I hate to say, I'm not a big fan of it myself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, I use drum machines, right? That was like, okay, you have these electronic drum machines, and all the drummers were like, this is godless, soulless, it's gonna ruin music and I won't have a job anymore. And, clearly that's not the case, right? Sampling too, right? Like technology, I think can be really scary when it first comes around. I think it just depends on how we deal with it. AI, I think in one way is terrifying. And I also think it's like, it has the potential to like devalue
Mm.
like art,
Okay.
um, because it's emulation of, you know, great stuff potentially, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm kind of scared of it, to be honest. Um, I think when you get into the conspiracy it's talk around it, it's like as soon as AI can like argue with itself and start determining that we're not like very useful, um I think we're Terminator could
Mm-hmm.
actually be our next revolution.
Or like a war game situation where it's computer versus computer, and it's just like, oh shit, where's this going?
Right, yeah. And I mean I think that we're not very far off. It's funny, I've been making this joke with people lately because I did buy a robot vacuum.
Yep.
So I'm like, just recently, and I'm like, okay, so I've taken my first step. Like, this is where it all goes bad, right? I have a robot now at my house. So, um,
Oh, yep. Tell me about a time when you thought about quitting, but you just kept on going regardless of the situation.
I mean, that's been the whole time pretty much. You know,
All my life, the whole since the beginning all the way to the now, it's just like
no,
sometimes.
I mean, there's key moments. I think with anything that you care about and you want to see succeed, and especially if you want to, I think for me, it's like, I would love to be able to just do this for a living. And so when you face the reality that that isn't happening for you, it can be really frustrating. And you know, if you have influences around you, they're like, why are you doing this? Like,
Mhm.
clearly, like, this is, you're not making money at it, or, you're spending more than you're making, or whatever. Those are times where, you kind of question why you're doing it. But I think also, like, we've had some really unfortunate situations and bad luck.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, there have been times where I actually thought I was done and I like put my stuff away in storage and, was calling it a day. And, somehow it always came back. Um, and I think nowadays I've kind of learned that like, if I'm feeling that way, then just take a break for a minute and realize that like, I'm going to come back to it. Might not be this week, might not be this year, but like, it's part of who I am. And like, ultimately I'm going to gravitate back towards that. So.
It's just that creative pull, that creative need to just because when you go a while, things start stacking up, and you start creatively, you start building, and then you get agitated because there's no release process because you're getting mad at yourself. You're going, I got this need, I got this urge, I need to put it out on something, and then you start getting irritated with yourself. You're like, why aren't you doing this? It's like driving you nuts. I always hated that moment.
Yep, exactly. Yep. But yeah, I mean, I think even like there's been tours too where you're just like, you know, get home and you're like, I'm never doing that again. You know?
Ever have like a tour moment where you're going, this was an absolute nightmare, a show, a tour, anything that was just like I can't even with this moment.
Yeah, there's been a few. I mean, when you're on tour, especially with like you're starting to see things happen more and the audiences are going well and you might have a filler date where there's like three people at your show. You know,
Yep.
those are nights where you're just like, well, this is like, why are we even doing this? But then, that's just like that's not the right attitude, right? Like, um, you have to like come to Jesus, so to speak,
Yes.
with your own self.
Yeah.
And you're starting to think that way. And I've done that, for sure.
Hmm.
Um, I've had to come to Jesus on a bunch of stuff. But we have had some tours that were pretty gnarly too. I don't want to name names, but we were supposed to finish a tour.
Hmm.
I'll name names with Thrill Kill Cult,
Okay.
and just wasn't working out. Being in the same bus was really rough.
Oh yeah.
Personalities were just not working well together, and so we ended up leaving that second half of that tour because it was just like someone's gonna get hurt, someone's gonna get in a fight, and this isn't gonna be good, and you know so.
When multiple acts, I mean, you guys were sharing a bus. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, yeah.
That's tough because I mean, everybody wants their own space, everybody wants their own area, and if there's too much, you know, you know, one act and another act, and I know Thrill Kill Cold, man, they've had a number of people in their band. I mean, I've seen them fill a stage with people. You know what I'm saying? So it's like your band versus theirs. I mean, I can only imagine. I'm not, poking fun at or jabbing at Thrill Kill, but I mean, just with all these different personalities on one bus, it's got to be like, ah,
Yeah, it can be that way for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, ultimately, it comes down to like respecting each other's space, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of times, like the back lounge is like the party area or whatever, and the front lounge is like the chill area, or sometimes it's the opposite. And then there's those bunks in the middle of those two worlds, right? So it's sort of like the quiet
Yep.
zone. But I mean, definitely when you're on tour in a bus or anything, really, like head earplugs and you know headphones that cover your ears are
Mm-hmm.
how to make it through.
Dude, I totally understand that. When you're going in and having like a creative moment, creative flow, I'll going to kind of make this a double. What's kind of your process of, do you start on the guitar? Do you start on, keys or drums? Is there like a primary where you're making a beat? What's your, when you're sitting in front, when you're coming up with an idea, is it like drum machine or is it guitar? Is it keys? Like what's your usual primary setting?
I mean, primarily most of the time it's in the computer. It's Pro
Okay.
Tools. It's like, hey, I'm gonna listen to like these new sounds, or
Mm-hmm.
there's a new synth that came out or whatever, and I'm messing around with it, and I find something that's like, ooh, that's cool, and then just starts building and building.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is a guitar, if I'm like playing around on the guitar and I come up with a riff, I'll like, you know, use my phone and voice record the riff, and then I'll, drop it to my computer and then pull it in, and that sometimes can happen. That's less often the case, but yeah, I mean, I'd say like 95% of the time it starts with like loops, samples, or sounds, you know,
That's
and it's always been that way.
that's awesome. Um,
Um, when I was working with like, during the Super Cool Nothing era when Mike Peoples was in the band so heavy as a songwriter,
mm,
um, he was just like constantly outputting riffs. So what he'd just sit at home and do riffs. So I mean, there was just like, you know, dozens of riffs, and we'd get together and just kind of listen through the riffs, and then if we found something, which we did, we'd jam it into Pro Tools and start
that's
messing around with it. So
That's amazing. I love hearing those processes. Tell me about your experience in the music scene. Do you see it like as like a roller coaster? Has it been kind of just a steady flow of, kind of what you've been experienced, at least from when you first started to where you are now?
I think it's almost like scattershot, and there isn't really a rhythm to like the scene in general. I think it changes regionally.
Mm-hmm.
You might have a little pocket where it like gets amazing. Um, I think like an example just popped in my head was like Richmond, Virginia, for example, right? Like there's a great club there. They have a really cool local scene that didn't exist for a long time. Whereas like, San Diego, not San Diego, but like, somewhere, San Jose was like a great place to go for a while. It's like, I don't even know if there's a venue there right now. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like up and down everywhere. So it's kind of hard to say. And I mean, I don't have my finger on the pulse of like what's really, happening everywhere. I think you see that a lot when you're touring a lot, but we haven't really toured a lot in the last several years. So I mean, I don't really have my finger on like where things are at. Um, but I mean, I do think it does kind of go up and down, just like anything else. That's probably safe to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, roller coaster ride. And to your point earlier, like I do think that there is like not there's a little bit of a resurgence, but I also think that there's new people that kind of bring a little blip. Um, I don't think it's as like when grunge happened or
Mm.
like uh, new metal.
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna see anything like that, but I think it's kind of comes up and down. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're seeing, Dark Forest Fest or like Cruel World and stuff like that, where you're seeing these sort of one-off festivals and stuff where it's mostly just these genres, I'm like, this is a good thing, don't you think? You know what I mean?
absolutely. I mean, and I think that part of that, like on the pessimistic side,
Mhm.
is that a lot of these festivals have come together because it's really hard to string tour dates together right now.
Absolutely. Oh, difficult.
And so for us, it's been really nice because we've been able to go out and do like one-off shows and like
Mhm.
there's a lot of people at them, which is great. Like, Cold Waves usually sells out. So it's like Disneyland.
Mhm.
You play an amazing venue, people are like all there, it's great. So it's not really reality, I think, if you're trying to tour, but um yeah, I mean, I do think there's been like a rise in like the festivals, and I think it's awesome. It's way more realistic for people to be able to like go do that on a weekend. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Did you get to experience the Industrial Museum yet in Chicago?
I have not.
Ooh, I haven't yet, but I talked with Martin, and I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, just seeing if, I mean, did you donate anything, or has there ever been a 16-volt piece that's in there yet?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think so. I think it's really more, and I could be wrong because I haven't been,
It's been
but
a
it's
number of things, though. That's what I've been hearing. I mean, there's so much that's been collected. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a something in there. I mean, even if it's not like a drum or a guitar, something, but like somewhere in there, you've got to be involved in that some way.
somewhere. Yeah. I mean, I think my impression of it has been that it's very like Chicago
Mhm.
focused, right? Like, the old wax track scene and all that stuff and all the sort of stuff that was going on around that. But I could be wrong. I haven't gone.
Good see. What does your music? I mean, this is kind of weird, kind of three-parter question, but what do you think? What does your music say about you as a person?
I mean, it's definitely a part of me. I think probably some of it might be my sort of split personality. There are two sides to me. There is a side that's uh the more sort of like open off, sort of empathetic, emotional side to some of our songs, but I also have a hard side too.
Yeah.
Um, I have a side of me that's very rigid and
Mm-hmm.
very like stoic. And so, you know, um, I sort of battle with those two sides a lot, and
Don't we all? Yeah.
I think 16-volt music battles with those two things as well. So,
I mean, not to get anything personal, but has there always been like this sort of mental illness where music has kind of been your creative process to kind of get things like that out?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, my family all has most people I know have mental problems. It's
Come
like,
on. I mean, yeah. I mean, my family tree is
well,
as well be considered,
yeah,
mental illness or something like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting right now too with like when people say mental health, it's like mental health isn't a diagnosis, right? It's like saying, it's just a thing. It's like your mental health,
Mental
right?
health. Yes. Body health, mental health, physical health. You know what I mean? There's the health, but then there's the illness. That's where it's at.
Right. So, I mean, in that aspect, yeah, there's mental health can be a lot of different things, and I mean, for me, my thing has been anxiety
Hmm.
for most of my life. I used to have like panic attacks really, really bad and all that stuff, and it runs in my family. Unfortunately, my kids got some of that from me.
Oh, mine
Um,
too.
so, yeah, I think that anything like that, I don't know. I think it's also just like the environments you grow up in, how you fit into society, like I feel like a lot of creative people are usually, and this is nothing new. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking here, but they're usually the ones that were bullied and, the ones that didn't hang out with the popular kids and,
Yeah,
so
I completely. Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
how it usually goes, right?
Oh no, believe me. I mean, you're preaching. I mean, most of the people I talk with, it's like we've always been the outcast, and that's why music and art has been our jumping point where it's like, nope, I find my comfort in this because it's my self-expression and you know what I mean? We've always kind of just been the outcast, the bully, you know, the yeah, the outcast. And it's just like it's not a movie of the Breakfast Club where everybody comes together. It's as we're leaving, it's we're all in our own worlds and we're trying to, have a collective of goths and, Revit heads and stuff like just people who have these sort of,
Well,
like,
I mean, we're tribal, like
yeah, exactly.
it's in our DNA. So,
Mm-hmm.
we have to find connection with some group of people. Otherwise, I think your mental health really goes really bad.
Yep.
Um, it's funny because I think about like creative people and like it's almost like it comes from isolation most of the time, right? Like I think about music and music is not a shared experience when it's being created with our fans, for example.
Yeah.
That's after the fact, like it's a very private and alone process.
And dark room, just being in
Yeah, well,
the
yeah, and I noticed my
yeah. Mhm.
computer went to sleep, so it's even
Okay,
darker.
no, that's fine. No, you're good.
Um, um, but yeah, and I think it's like, the popular kids or whatever, when, they all had like, practice and they had a lot of activities and things they were doing and did, more social. And I think that like it's just kind of the way it work.
Yeah, absolutely.
The people that aren't in that go home and, whether it be like, grab their skateboard or,
Yep.
get their paints out or their crochet hooks or whatever it is, um, create stuff.
Yep, absolutely. No. What like again, this is kind of a three-parter. So I got what you say about what do you want your fans to take away from your music?
I mean, I guess for me, I just, uh, that's a tough question.
Sorry.
I mean, I hope that they, find something in it that has value to them. Um, I mean, I think for me personally, like selfishly, you know, what I've always wanted to be known as is like a good songwriter, um, and also pushes the edges of like, sort of the scene or whatever. Um, so I guess for me, that's kind of like a thing, right? But yeah, I mean, I think the ultimate thing is to hear people say like, "Oh, this means something to me," or this song got me through this or whatever. That's just stuff that's always like humbling, and I can't I can't buy that, right? Like, um, and I never know what that's going to be or how that's going to work out.
And
It's
then
just,
what do you want non-fans to take away from your music?
um, I don't really care.
Okay. No,
I mean, I think it's tough, right? Like sick people, like I'll meet people that, you know, have never heard the band, right? And they're probably not our audience. And they're like, "Oh, you should, play me a song." And I'm like, "I can send you one song, but you're not going to understand anything about 16 volt or any band in this genre because the music that we're making for the most part
Mhm.
is so diverse in itself, like we have songs that are super heavy and like there's not a lot of electronics, and you could say, oh, that's like a metal song. But then we have other songs that are like not that at all. So it's like, how do I even send a song to someone to like explain it,
Oh
you
wow.
know?
Oh yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that where it's like, oh, just play us a song, on the keyboard. I'm just like, it's not that type of thing. I can't pull up something and play Wonderwall or, you know,
Right.
Freebird or something. It's like it's not that kind of vibe or whatever. That always drove me nuts.
Wouldn't it be awesome if we did that though? That'd be so easy. It'd be
But
so much easier.
oh my God, that would be hilarious.
Making it so hard on ourselves.
Right. Okay, so one last question, then we'll get to the final question of the podcast. If you could collaborate with anybody, who would it be? Music, non-music, anybody, doesn't matter. Live or dead. Live or dead.
Wow. Gosh, I don't even know if I can answer that. I don't have a singular person.
Okay. No, no, no,
You know,
nothing just popped
actually,
in.
you know what? Actually, there was, Sia,
Yeah, of
uh, is one that I just, I mean, she's kind of gone pop lately, like super
course.
pop. Her early stuff was just
Oh, her
amazing
early
to
stuff was
me.
beautiful. Beautiful.
Um, I mean, to be able to collaborate with like someone who can write that way and sing that way would just be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, Another person who I really have been enjoying lately is Kay Flay.
hmm
Um, that would be fun to work with her on something.
That'd be cool. Like a little.
Massive Attack,
Yeah.
another one. There's just too many. I can't.
No, you're good. That's
There's
all.
too many, and I also can't name anybody.
No. Okay, so usually any podcast I do, I always kind of end with this one, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you.
Interesting to talk to you. I mean, amazing conversation. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Um, Anybody who looks up to your music, anybody who's listening to this, just having a hard time, or if they're an artist or musician, what is your one piece of advice that you would like to give them?
I mean, I guess, there's always an exit in a good way, right? Like nothing is permanent. You can always find a way out of things, right? In a good way. Um, and I think that's across the board, like with music, creativity, whether it's like writer's block or like you feel like there's nothing left in your life and you can't do anything, right? Like there's always a way to like improve it. And it might not be from you. You have to like give life a chance to like give you a gift sometimes too. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you so
great.
much, Eric. I really appreciate your time, buddy.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Wonderful conversation, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care. Thanks everybody.